What I'd like to do is what we did last time at the beginning, which is just get up and talk to someone not from your team about what you've done since last time we met. Any progress you've made, and since some of you may have taken a vacation, oddly enough, you can talk about what's your biggest question you have right now or your biggest concern. All right, so those two things, what you've been working on and what your biggest question or concern is with your project right now. All right? All right, let's pull it back together here. Before we move on to the next part, does anyone have anything that they'd like to share of something that they've been working on or their biggest concern or biggest question? Anyone want to share something? Or I'll call on you randomly. All right, how about someone from this table? You guys had a good conversation going.
So I guess one of their biggest concerns was, so they're hitting all like the right needs,
Yep.
but they're finding that other companies, there's competition in the space, because they're finding the correct needs. So these competitors are a little bit further ahead. So they're trying to, pivot and trying to figure out where the biggest need is.
Yeah, good.
Well, I think one of our biggest challenges is we have the buy one, give one fruit basket idea,
Okay.
and we're trying to figure out where to source our produce from, so we haven't quite figured that out yet.
Aren't you going to source it from Tyson, right?
Yes, we should talk to him. We've talked to Darren over the phone, so
Oh, you
we have
have?
some
Okay, good.
ideas, but we still don't have anything solid. But something we did do in the past few weeks was Wendy created a really cool survey that we're going to send out in the next few weeks to gather more data from people on what they would like to see in a food basket, how much they'd be willing to pay, just more customer information.
Great.
So I guess the struggle that I've had is, we came into this competition thinking about disease surveillance and kind of developing a product that does that, but not necessarily addresses the need. So I guess I'm coming to the realization, and I ultimately want to help prevent the spread of illness and infectious disease, and knowing about whether or not there's been a sick individual in a room at a certain time of the day is only half the battle, or less than that. And so, developing something that can, what can you do with that information, and developing, making it meaningful to the user. And so fulfilling the need, I think, coming back to kind of some of the first discussions we had, and really developing something that will address the need and not just provide information. Because information is good, but it's not going to be very sustainable.
So have you thought about your approach or your next step to be able to start to figure that out a little more?
Well, we have, so, what I've realized is I need to talk with more people and really ask them, what could you do with that information? Like if you knew about there's a sick person in this room at 11 o'clock, today, sitting at this table, what could you do about it? What would you do about it? Would that be valuable? And just talk, we need to talk with more people to generate a better and clear understanding of the need that we can address with that information, and somehow building that into the product that we're making.
So we're going to talk about teams, and I don't think you can give a talk at Michigan about teams without hearing this.
We want the Big Ten championship, and we're going to win it as a team. They can throw out all those great backs and great quarterbacks and great defensive players throughout the country and in this conference. But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team. And if we think that way, all of us, everything that you do, you take into consideration what effect does it have on my team. Because you can go into professional football, you can go anywhere you want to play after you leave here. You will never play for a team again. You'll play for a contract, you'll play for this, you'll play for that. You'll play for everything except the team. And think what a great thing it is to be a part of something that is the team. We're going to win it. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. Better than anybody else in this conference, we're going to play together as a team. We're going to believe in each other. We're not going to criticize each other. We're not going to talk about each other. We're going to encourage each other. And when we play as a team, when the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
For those of you who don't know who that is Bo Schembechler. 20 years ago, he gave that famous speech about the team. It's actually very well known if you're a Michigan football fan, which it just so happens that I am. So, and I'm already ready for February practices to start again so we can erase some memories. So I thought what we'd do here, I was thinking about Bo Schembechler's speech and thinking about all these different things about how we can develop teams. So I thought I'd start us out with a handful of kind of motivational quotes to maybe help us get in that mindset of working together in a team. This is one that I think characterizes this group pretty well, which is never doubt that a small group of committed people can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. There's a lot of power, I think, in working together with people who share a vision and can do things that haven't been done before. And I think we're seeing that with Tyson's group and some of the groups that you're working on or working with as well. So you might have heard some of these before. 3 types of people, right? Those who get things done, those who watch things get done, and those who wonder how so much got done. So hopefully your teams are ones that get things done. This is one from local hero Henry Ford. Coming together is the beginning, keeping together is progress, working together is success. True, there's no I in team, but there is a U in suck. I don't know if that's, I think that one's new. I don't think before we started texting that we would have ever thought of that before, but now we know. So on a more positive note, none of us is as smart as all of us. I think we definitely have benefits of working together. Teamwork is the ability to work as a group toward a common vision, even if that vision becomes extremely blurry, and it will. So there's some good and bad in that, right? I think probably some of what you've faced already has been that blurring of the vision. And I think that if we work together, if you're able to develop good teams, then you can find a way to refocus, whether that's pivoting or finding new skills that you need or new people that you need, or whatever it is, but to be able to make that vision in focus again or find a new vision. And here's one: teamwork makes the dream work. And I think all of us here have dreams, aspirations to do bigger things. And so hopefully that teamwork can help us to get there. So what I'd like to do now is to talk a little bit about some teams that you've been on. Maybe think for just a minute about a team. Maybe it's a sports team, or maybe it's a team project you've worked on, or maybe you've worked out in a company and worked as part of a team. It could have been successful or not successful. And just I'd like to ask, how did it function, and was it successful or was it not successful? Why or why not? And I'd like to have you share, some thoughts on that, maybe an experience or two on, we've all worked in a team in some setting before. So who can give us an example of either a time they've been successful with the team or maybe not so successful, and give us some insight on that?
I guess I have an example of both. So for EHS, we do a capstone test, EHS 600, that I did last semester, and it was based on teamwork in general. So the whole class was divided into teams, and there were challenges throughout the semester, and whoever got the most points at the end won, and the projects got a little bigger as the semester went on. So I had a team of 9 people, and that was an example of a successful team because we had a few challenges that were over 4 days, put together a presentation with an idea, like a campaign, and basically through internet and Google documents and shared documents, and then dividing work and jobs very specifically, we were successful in putting them together in a short amount of time. And I think it was the size of the team that was really helpful with that. And then an example of a team that was more of a challenge was this summer I did an internship in Bolivia, and there were 4 of us. We were interdisciplinary team from School of Social Work, 2 from Public Health, and 1 from Public Policy. And I think some of our personalities just clashed a little bit within the team, which was obviously more of like a personal type struggle, but it influenced our team like dynamic and relationship. So that was a challenge to kind of like rise above personal issues in order to be successful, kind of with limited resources and limited support. So yeah.
Very good. Yeah, so you touched on some elements of, you mentioned personality, which can be a reason why teams either succeed or fail. If you could put your finger on any particular characteristic on that first experience on why that team was successful, any thoughts on?
I think also because we knew it was a class,
Yeah.
it was kind of more of a lighthearted spirit to the whole approach to it. So we were like, we're obviously going to try our best, but we're not getting paid for this or winning anything or something. So what we produced a good product or a good presentation from it. So I think just our general disposition really helped.
You had kind of a alignment of your commitment towards it.
Yeah.
So, okay, good. Anyone else want to share anything about experiences working on teams that they've had? So I've worked in a couple of different ventures and have had also similar experiences of really good teams and really some pretty poor teams actually. One example of not such a great team, I was working on commercializing a technology where we had a pretty significant, we didn't realize it at first, but as we went on, we had a pretty significant difference in our mindsets as to like how much time we wanted to commit to this, or how much, so we were students and trying to balance our student work with also trying to make this cool little, commercialize this technology. So whether we wanted to focus on actually getting degrees or whether we all wanted to drop out or whether, there was something in between, how much money we were all putting in. And we found out that after working on it for quite some time actually, that we just didn't have alignment in those things. It was probably something that we should have talked about really early on. That we didn't, and it ended up hurting us quite a bit. And I've also worked on a team as part of a venture where we were also developing a technology and actually had very similar alignment. So we had, we were all very dedicated to what we were doing, wanted to see it through, and were able to work very closely together, but also had some of these things like you mentioned where we could work really well in person, but we're also able to trust each other enough so we could work apart and not have to worry about whether one person was doing their job or whether the other person was doing their job or whatever it was. And so we'll talk about maybe some of the reasons why that is and hopefully try to benefit your teams in that way. So one way to think about teams, this is kind of a clever way that was developed a while back by this researcher named Tuckman. He talks about 5 stages of teams being forming, so forming a team, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. So forming is just kind of that start where we all come together. Storming is a pretty typical process where he talks about at the beginning of our team, we start to have these conflicts of alignment and of motivations and how we all fit together. And a lot of times we go through some type of process to work through that. Norming is what he calls basically that when we're actually starting to hit that ability to work together in a cohesive way. Performing is when we're able to really take it to the next level, and of course at some point all of our teams come to some type of end. So just out of interest, I thought, I know we had a little bit of a formation process in here, but we didn't talk about it that much previously, but how did you find the people that you're working with? I know we had a site to help, but we also had mixers, and some of you probably grabbed your friends. What are the different ways then that you formed a team? And if you're welcome to, if you feel comfortable, sharing whether or not that's kind of, you felt a good way to find a team, or maybe there's better approaches to finding your team.
The 5 of us were in a class together on solving societal problems through entrepreneurship and innovation, and we initially formed a team in that just because we had similar interests around both health and wellness and the environment. And we found out about this program and decided to
Just keep it going.
carry our project over. Yeah.
Great. All right, anyone else? Go ahead.
Just after trying to reach out to people, I mean, I put up a little post and someone contacted me through that, through the website, and then felt like we needed another person, so I started emailing some groups of people, like people at church that I knew that go to school here, and I tried to work through connections there, nothing came of that. Then I emailed the Health Information Student Organization to send out, I explained what I wanted to do, and one of the other team members that I now have on our team contacted me and said, I'm interested in this space. So.
Got it. Great. What I won't do is ask you to tell us whether or not you think you're in the storming phase right now, or the norming phase, or the performing phase, or hopefully not the adjourning phase quite yet. But I would like you to think about that a little bit. Think about where you're at in terms, and I'm not saying it's always directly linear like this. That's part of the reason why I drew these little circles here, is just, sometimes it kind of can go in these different paths, and sometimes certainly we'll be in that norming or the performing phase, and suddenly we find ourselves, in heated arguments again, and maybe, life changes happen, and we're taking different paths, and we're back to kind of a storming phase. So it can certainly be dynamic, and I think we've all experienced that. That's not necessarily anything particularly new. But what I'd like to do for the next few minutes then is to have you think a little bit about the roles that you have on your team and the skills that you have on your team, and assess that a little bit. So a lot of times we define roles in two different ways. One of them would be kind of a work function role. So like I'm the sales guy, or I do the programming for our team, or I'm the mechanical engineer, or whatever it may be. And then sometimes we also think about roles in terms of kind of our behavioral dynamics. So we might think about, this is the person who's kind of the visionary, or they're the coordinator, or this is the person who is the networker, or they're the ones who are kind of they implement everything for us. Or sometimes we might have the peacemaker, right, especially in the storming phase. So what I'd like you to do now is to take a few minutes and talk amongst yourself about some of the roles that you have on your teams. And if you're not sitting with your team now, that's fine. Talk to the people around you. And think about what are the different roles that you have, both from a kind of a functional work function standpoint as well as this kind of personality or behavioral dynamic standpoint. All right? In addition to discussing the roles that you have, obviously every team has different skill sets. Different people have different skill sets. And I think judging by kind of the breadth of the teams that you're on and the projects you're working on, where some of you are very much, apps and tech stuff, and some of you are, goods and services, and just all over the map, it's, obviously expected that you're going to have different sets of skills. So now as we move on, I'd like to talk a little bit about those skills and have you discuss these questions, which are what skills do you have on your team? But also, I think these next ones are very important, which is what skills do you need on your team in order for you to go to kind of that next step, right? So if you're developing an app, right, do you have a programmer on your team? And if so, great. Or do you need that? And then to think about, how, if you don't have it, how can you obtain it? So is this something that you can bring on your team temporarily, or is it a contract? Or is this someone that we need on our team full time? Do we need to have that skill set there with us every single day? So think about, what is it that next step that you need to take, and what skills you need to get you there? And also think about kind of that 12-month or maybe 2 or 3 or 4 years out, kind of what you would need in order to continue to be successful. And just start to brainstorm how you think you could obtain them, whether that's developing them internally or pulling someone from the outside or contracting or whatever that is. And then we'll discuss that together after a few minutes here as well. Does anyone want to share with us quickly a skill that they think their team needs that they don't have right now? Or are you guys all perfectly, cohesive teams, complete?
One thing we know for sure is we have a team member who's not here who knows how to do user interface for apps.
Uh-huh.
We need someone who has the programmer skills.
Oh, right.
Which I can imagine other groups maybe have team members, but a lot of people are thinking the same thing.
Okay. So do you have any thoughts on how you're going to?
Well, like for example, that team member, like I think she would maybe know people who
Sure.
we could reach out to, or we were already talking about the idea of do we contract this out to someone who has that skill and it's easy to put a value on it, like we'll pay you this much per hour.
Yeah.
You need 20 hours of your time.
Yeah.
I don't think we've decided yet, but it
Okay.
seems clear that there are channels to get to those people.
Yep. Great. All right. Well, I would definitely want to encourage you to continue to think about the needs or the skills that you guys need on your team. And also, certainly, we didn't talk about it that much, but the skills that you have on your team also obviously are a lot of your strengths. So those are things to play off of and to think about. If I have, this particular skill, what can I do with it? How can I leverage that to better solve this problem? So the last point I want to make here together is for you to think about team dynamics. And what I would encourage you to do, on my experience, based on my experience, is to have what I call the open discussion, or kind of the big discussion, and to have it as early as possible. And by that, I simply mean, in my experience, you are wise to take some time early on to discuss with your team what your level of commitment is. What are the resources you're committing, time or money? Sometimes we see conflicts where someone puts in, I don't know where Tyson's $5,000 came from, but sometimes, one person puts in $5,000, one person.
It was from me and Darren out of pocket as working.
Did you
students
split it
to figure
50-50?
No, Darren had more money than I did at the time.
So, maybe afterwards we can discuss this. Well, maybe you can tell us real quick, like how did you handle that, one person is putting in more money and one person is putting in less? Was that a problem?
No, there was never even a second of resentment. I mean, maybe I get to say that because I put in less money. And I'm pretty good at reading Darren, and when he's angry about something, that has never ever been an issue.
Uh-huh.
It was
He
just
doesn't
something.
needle you like I have more because.
Oh, I mean, he does do that, right? Because he does have more money than I do, and he views money as like a social currency in a lot of ways. But no, I mean, there was never any weirdness about it, like ever. There
So-
was just never,
That is very rare, actually. More times than not, when you have people committing money, say, you want to develop the app, and you pay a developer $5,000, and one person puts in 1 and one person puts in 4. Often the discussion that results then is, I own 80% of the company, you own 20% of the company. Things like that happen all the time, and often that will cause that team to totally dissolve. So there are ways around that by having an open discussion and trying to figure out, well, you know what, I can't contribute as much money, but I am able to contribute these other valuable resources. Having those kinds of discussions. Now I see it a lot with student teams as well, that there's this difference in commitments because you're balancing things like paying tuition, making grades, how important is a competition versus this class I'm taking. I'm also trying to search for a job and I have interviews next weekend. So to be able to discuss with people, with your teammates, what is your level of commitment? What is your vision for where this venture will be? What would it take for you to go from this is an idea to this is something I'm committed to? So I talk with a lot of student companies who are, they have 3 people on their company, and 2 of them, no matter what happens, they are going to work for, GM and Google next year, period. But they're working on this company. The 3rd team member is really, really committed. But until they express that, there's often this difference, there's this conflict that they need to resolve somehow, because up until that point, the one team member who's really committed is really frustrated with the other 2 because they don't want to see this company be successful, but he does. And really, at the end of the day, they're saying, well, we want it to be successful, but we're going to Google next semester anyway, or next year anyway after I graduate. So, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with them deciding to go that path, But what's important is to have that open discussion early on so you understand where your visions align, and are there ways to make it work? When we get people doing things, they do become invested, and they find out whether or not they really do want to do this or not. When we stand in the room and talk about, oh, like we really should be doing this or we should be doing that, a lot of times that commitment just isn't there. So I think Tyson makes a valid point of getting people involved is probably the best way to find out whether or not we really are committed, or whether we're not, or whether we really do enjoy this, or whether we don't. Do we like the roller coaster, or do we want to hop off? So I think that is wise counsel. But I would encourage you, kind of in closing, to have a discussion like this. And, you know, sometimes it might be a little painful. Hopefully it's not. Hopefully you have enough trust in each other where you can talk to each other and try to find where you align to make sure the things you're working on are working well for all of you. So in closing, one more quote, which is, I'd encourage you to start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. All right? I think you all have things that you can start with and things that you can do. Your team has skills that are valuable. You have ideas that are valuable, and you can go from there. So what next? I'd encourage you to continue the discussions that we started today. So discuss with your team, your individual and team visions, goals, and commitments, and try to be open and try to find what's the best way for you to work together. Think about your different roles. Think about the skills that you need on your team currently and as you move forward. And with that, I think we'll wrap up. I'll hang out for a few more minutes if anyone wants to stay and chat, but you're free to go as well. Thanks.